Hi everybody, I'm Professor Leong. This video is going to be a little bit more informal than a lot of my videos. And what I'm hoping to do is to give you some suggestions about how to adapt to remote or online learning this semester. And I think this will be especially helpful to 1Ls, and within the set of 1Ls, especially helpful to students who are first-generation law students. So if you don't have a lawyer in your family, or maybe you don't even know any lawyers, I hope that this video will be helpful to you in particular. But I also hope that there will be something for almost everybody in here, or something that almost everybody will find helpful just in making this transition to the online learning environment that we are all confronting right now. So all of these, I want to emphasize, are just ideas. And while I hope that many of these will work for many people, nothing is going to work for everybody because everybody learns differently. Okay, suggestion number 1, don't reinvent the wheel. So if you're in law school, you're already a good student. And the reason I know that is because if you weren't a good student, you wouldn't have gotten into law school. And so what I really want to emphasize is that you may see or hear about your colleagues, other 1Ls, doing things that don't really make sense to you, like briefing cases or using many color-coded highlighters or something like that. If those things seem helpful to you, that's great. But if they don't, you don't have to start studying an entirely new way just because you're in law school now and you're learning online rather than in person. You already have a lot of knowledge about what works for you because you've been a good student probably your whole life. My second suggestion, the corollary to the first suggestion, is to try things. So if you do see or hear about a new strategy that your classmate or your friend is using that seems interesting to you, go ahead and try it out. And as you try out something new, I recommend that you approach it from a place of curiosity. So ask yourself, what happens when I do this? Do I feel like I'm understanding the material better? Do my notes make more sense to me when I go back to them? I would recommend this approach of curiosity over an approach of judgmentalism. So for example, if you find yourself having thoughts like, why is this so hard for me? What's wrong with me? Why don't I understand this? That's not productive. So think of yourself as a scientist and be reflective and just think about experimenting with what works for you. This is something that you will continue doing not just this semester, but frankly, your whole life. I'm still figuring out how to do this now. Suggestion number 3, having said that, right, having said that learning is individual, I do have a few specific tips for taking notes in an online learning environment. So my third suggestion is that if your professor does give you materials in advance, let's say a PowerPoint or an outline of what's going to be happening that day, you can try to figure out a way to use those materials to take your own notes. So an example would be to export a PowerPoint to a Word document and then take notes either next to or underneath the PowerPoint slides. This is a really good way of keeping yourself in line with what's going on in class, or focused on what's going on in class. My fourth suggestion, and I think this is particularly helpful in the online learning era, if class is being recorded, see if you can take a really minimalist approach to taking notes. See if you can just write down the highlights. So if I personally, and again, this is just something that I think would work for me, but if I personally were taking notes in an online class, probably what I would do is just write down a few words whenever somebody said something I thought was really important, or when somebody said something that I didn't understand. And then at the same time, I would write down what time it was when they said that, because that time information, that timestamp, will allow me to go back to the recording and listen to those parts again, which I flagged during class as being the most critical. I think that this suggestion will also serve you well when we are no longer in this online learning environment. Something that I notice a lot in 1Ls is that people attempt to make an actual transcript of the class, like writing down literally everything the professor and their classmates say. And that's not productive because it's you know, your hands are busy, but it's not going into your brain. And so what's much more productive is just to listen And that's especially true in an online learning situation where the technology is literally creating a transcript for you. So it's particularly unnecessary in that situation for you also to be making a transcript. Suggestion number 5 is probably my most important suggestion. And it is that if something goes wrong, just let it go. Don't dwell on it. So let's say that you get cold called and your microphone doesn't work, or your internet goes out for a few seconds while your professor is asking the question and you miss a few words. First of all, everybody understands. Everybody is adapting to this new online learning environment this semester, and I would say that your professors are, in many instances, as stressed out or perhaps even more stressed out than you are, because everybody is getting up the learning curve right now. So first of all, everybody understands. Secondly, and I think more importantly, nobody will remember the next day. You might remember, but nobody else is going to remember. One of my friends from law school recently brought up something that she felt was really traumatic that had happened during a law school class. And I could even barely remember who taught the class. Now that's a few years further out, but I will say that people are so focused on themselves, and particularly in this online learning situation, which is new to everybody. Don't worry if something goes wrong, because the only person who's going to care about it is you. Don't dwell on something that already happened, move on to the next thing. Suggestion number 6, I think this one is important as well. Make sure that you get to know your professors even though you are learning remotely. Now, this is going to take a little bit more effort in the online learning era because you can't stay after class for a few minutes to ask a question. You're not going to run into your professor in the hall more than likely. There aren't, situations where you can just drop by their office. The way you approach a professor will probably vary from one professor to another. I personally really like it when people email me to set up either individual or small group Zoom office hours. I find that to be really helpful and productive, especially when people come with specific questions. I also like getting a really well thought out email from a student with a specific question. And it can be something that we covered in class or something that goes a little bit beyond class. But I enjoy an email that is really succinct and shows that the student has put in some legwork trying to figure this out on their own, and then turn to me when they reached a stopping point, when they couldn't get any further on their own. The larger point here is that it is really important to connect with your professors. And first-generation students don't always think about this right away, but professors are the people who are going to serve as your references, who are going to write your letters of recommendation for summer jobs or for clerkships. And so it's really important to have a relationship with at least some of the professors that you have your first year. In addition, it'll just make the classroom experience a lot more pleasant for everybody involved. Suggestion number 7, connect with some people in your class and see if you can figure out constructive ways to study together. Now, of course, Zoom lends itself to something kind of analogous to a traditional study group where you all get together and maybe work through some problems or compare notes or something like that. I think that can be a good use of Zoom. But there are also more creative or more unconventional ways that Zoom can mimic other parts of the in-person learning experience. And so let me give you just one example, and I'm sure that you can come up with creative ideas on your own. I have a few friends who are also professors, and what I will do with these friends, and we both have a lot of work to do, whether it's just clearing out our email inboxes or working on an article or book that we're writing, we will get in a Zoom together, maybe spend a few minutes at the beginning chatting, how's your day going, that type of thing, and then we'll just work for a few hours. And I liken this to making a study date at a coffee shop or at a library with one of your friends. You can't slack off because your friend is there and you're both trying to work, but you're not necessarily even working on the same thing. You're not necessarily doing anything other than just motivating each other by your presence. And there is actually research that shows that people work more effectively when they're in an environment where other people are working as well. And so I think this is why libraries and coffee shops tend to be good places to study. So a Zoom can be an analog for a library or a coffee shop. This is also a good way to study with your classmates who perhaps are living a little bit further away, for example. Finally, this is number 8, I think, if I haven't lost count. Take care of yourself outside of class. And just to be clear, this is not some hippie self-care thing. That's not really my style. The reason I'm recommending that you take care of yourself is because this is what will allow you to succeed. It's what will allow you to perform at your highest potential throughout the semester. And when I say to take care of yourself outside of class, I mean 3 things. Number 1, get enough sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, nothing else is going to work. Number 2, eat right. And when I say eat right, I don't mean some exotic new diet or, you have to eat a certain amount of all the food groups every day or anything like that. I really just mean make sure you're eating enough and that you're getting enough protein and carbs that your brain will work during class. This is really important during Zoom class because Zoom is exhausting. I think that most people find online learning a little bit more tiring than in-person class, and you need to fuel your brain. Well, I should say you need to fuel your body so that it can keep your brain going effectively through a Zoom learning experience. And then finally, you need to get some exercise. And when I say get some exercise, what I really just mean is move around. Law school is not necessarily the time to start some hardcore new physical fitness regime, although if there is something that you already do that you like, you should keep doing it because it'll make you happy. But what I do mean is that when we're already all sitting around a lot, even more than you normally do in law school, because you're sitting while you're studying, you're sitting while you're reading, and then you're sitting for class and you're not even walking from one class to another class. And so if that's kind of the baseline of your daily schedule, you need to build some movement into that. And when I say movement, I could mean just walking around the block a few times. Maybe you take a 15-minute walk in the morning between classes and another 15-minute walk in the evening after your last class. Whatever it is, that will give you a reset so that when you come back to your computer and sit down, your brain is ready to go into another Zoom session or to start reviewing online materials or whatever it might be. So I hope that this video gives you a few ideas to try. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm going to put my contact information below this video. And otherwise, I hope that some of these tips are helpful and that your 1L year is off to a fantastic start.